Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Unacademy, India's largest online learning portal for the preparation of various competitive exams. My name is Neelam Malkani, and I'm going to be your guide and facilitator for CAT and management exams. In today's session, I'm going to cover a very important topic of these exams, that is figures of speech. Now, this topic becomes very important if you want to learn English comprehensively. Moreover, in recent years, questions based on figures of speech have appeared in exams like XAT, SNAP, and IFT. A couple of times, the question based on figures of speech was also after RC. Which rhetorical device author is using to put his argument, right? So this is how questions based on figure of speech was also in reading comprehension. So it makes all the sense to cover this topic so that you are ready to do questions based on figures of speech. All right? So for those of you who are attending the session for the first time or who are watching my video for the first time, let me introduce myself. My name is Neelam Malkani. I am Masters in English Literature and possess around 12 years of experience of test preparation industry. I have trained students for exams like CAT, GRE, GMAT, SAT, IELTS and TOEFL. My areas of expertise have been English and verbal reasoning. I have also been into content development and design and set assessment papers of English and reasoning for various exams. I have also served as an examiner for an international organization, and recently I have authored a comprehensive book of English based on the curriculum of competitive exams. The book is returned in both Hindi and English. This video is brought to you by Unacademy. So let me take you to its portal and tell you step by step what you can do to be part of this platform. First, you have to download Unacademy Learning app in the Play Store and fill in all the details. You will get to see plus free courses and special classes. If you want to attend classes with CAT, you will have to go in the plus category. Once you go in that, you will see all the courses which are offered under this category, such as CAT, GRE and IELTS. When you opt for CAT, you will see all the features that you will be availing once you enroll yourself for CAT course, such as 30 hours of live sessions every day. So as per your availability, as per your convenience, and as per your choice, you can choose the time of your preparation, you can choose the time of your attending class, right? These sessions are delivered by top 14 educators of India, those educators who have wealth of experience of mentoring and guiding students for different exams, right? And the courses which are delivered are well structured, well designed by those people who have extensive experience of curriculum designing. Every new month, you get to see a new course being launched on Plus platform to cater to specific needs of different exams. When you go for the subscription, you will be shown all the models of subscription. If you want to go only for a month, you will be able to do that. If you want to go for 3 months, that option will also be available. If you want to prepare for CAT 2020, you can go for 1 year subscription. So depending upon your plan of the preparation of this exam, you can choose a model, subscription model. When you go in the payment, you will have to type Neelam if you want to avail 10% for the discount on whichever model you choose. If you want to avail 10% discount, you have to type this code and you will be in a position to avail that discount, right? National Scholarship Test, which is organized by Unacademy to give you the feel of CAT exam. Before you actually take your test, you should be conversant with how the exam is going to be, since the pattern has changed this year. So this exam is going to be based on the recent changes in the pattern that have been brought in this year, right? So the exam is going to have 3 sections. After the exam, you will be given detailed analysis of each section by an expert faculty who have designed the papers, right? So same day you will be given the detailed analysis, so you will see what mistakes you made and what improvisation you need to do for your next mock, all right? You will be given your All India ranking and you will be given your scale score of each section, right? So these are the benefits that you will be availing if you take this test. What more? If you are one of the top 50 scorers of this test, you will get Amazon vouchers of rupees 5,000, right? So what are you waiting for? Just go, enroll yourself and take the exam coming Sunday. Now let's start with today's session. As I said, figures of speech. So when you see this slide, right, so it brings vibrancy, it brings color, it brings vividness, right? So that is what is the purpose of using figure of speech in a sentence or in a writing or in a conversation, right? So figures of speech are used to persuade a reader or persuade a listener, or same time beautify the language. All right, so let's get started with figures of speech. Let's understand what these figures of speech are and how they are used, and then we will do important figures of speech which have appeared in management exams in recent years, right? So a figure of speech is a rhetorical device that achieves a special effect by using words in a distinctive way, right? So words are not used in a literal way. Words are not used as per their dictionary definition. Rather, they are used in a very clever way, in a distinct way, or in a metaphorical way, right? So they are used in an idiomatic way. It is essentially a word or a phrase used in a non-literal sense for rhetorical or vivid effect. As I said, the primary purpose of using a figure of speech is to create an effect, to have an impact on the listener or reader, right? So in order to have that impact, author uses these devices, right? So they are not used in a literal sense. So that is what is the primary definition of a figure of speech. See the difference in these sentences. So it was raining hard, hence we had to put off our plan to go for a picnic. Look at this sentence. It was raining cats and dogs, hence we had to put off our plan to go for a picnic. Now the first sentence uses idiomatic expression, a figure of speech. It was raining cats and dogs, right? So this phrase is not used in a literal sense. You cannot anticipate that from above dogs and cats were falling down, right? It was raining only, but it was raining so hard, it was raining torrentially, that we are comparing this kind of raining with raining cats and dogs. So this is an expression which is used for hard rain or torrential rain, all right? So this gives you a different effect. When you read this, it ignites your imagination, right? So you picture something to anticipate what kind of rain it must be there, right? So that way, you can see that this sentence ignites your imagination or ignites your, picture. Usain Bolt runs faster than a cheetah, right? Usain Bolt runs very fast. So here, this is a very simple sentence which says he runs very fast, right? So it doesn't seem to be very, very interesting because the word has been used in a very literal sense. But when I compare his running with that of a cheetah, so that gives me an imagination, right? So it puts that picture vividly before me that he runs as fast as a cheetah does, right? So that way you see that this effect can be brought in a sentence when you use these figures of speech, all right? So this is the primary purpose of using a figure of speech. Now literature is riddled with figures of speech, and that's why we get to see these examples Figures of speech make language colorful and complex. Sometimes they also make a sentence very complex, right? So what are different spheres in which figures of speech are used? One, in music, we will see a lot of figures of speech which are based on sound, right? It's like alliteration, assonance, onomatopoeia. These figures of speech will be based on sound. So they are heavily used in music. While composing and while writing lyrics, authors or the writers used these figures of speech to bring that effect, to bring that dramatic effect in their composition. In speaking, as a rhetorical device, it is used heavily by those people who are in public speaking in order to articulate better, in order to relate better with the audience or the listeners. They use these rhetorical devices, right? In advertising, it is widely used, right? I'll give you some examples in coming slides where in advertising, some of figures of speech have been used to bring that effect in language test, and that is why we are having this presentation today. They are part and parcel of language test as well, because they are integral part of language learning. All right, so if you want to be a true learner of English language, you cannot afford to miss this very important part of language learning. All right, and of course, if you have command over these figures of speech, solving these questions is going to be a cakewalk for you. All right, so let's get started with first figure of speech that I have covered, simile. All right, so simile is a stated comparison. When you try to compare two unlikely things by using as or like words, you are using simile, right? So we inadvertently do that in our daily conversation or in our day-to-day affairs when we compare very unlikely things with when we compare two very unlikely things, right? So look at example. He fought like a lion, right? So here, this word is comparing someone's ferociousness or someone's spirit in a fight, in a war, with that of a lion, right? So a man and a lion cannot be compared, right? So they are poles apart. There is a world of difference between the characteristic of a man and a lion. But here, when it comes to fighting a war, his characteristics are being compared with that of a lion, right? So this comparison is done by using like, and that is why this word is categorized, or this sentence is categorized using simile. All right, you were as brave as a lion. So that's also simile, as I said. Like and as, both can be used when you use a simile. All right. We were packed in the room like sardines. So here we are being compared with a kind of fish. So a sardine which is packed very tightly in a pack, in a carton, and is sold in the market. So with that, people's situation is being compared. Possibly these people were put up in a very crowded room, put up in a very compressed room, right? So possibly they could not move easily in that room. So that is why they are comparing that situation. We were packed in the room like sardines, to bring that dramatic effect in the reader that we were in a very bad situation. All right. So this is the dramatic effect that can be brought in a sentence if it uses a figure of speech. As black as coal, as clear as crystal, right? So I can say it's very clear, but when I say as clear as crystal, so it brings that effect in my speaking. As cold as ice, as cool as cucumber, as cunning as a fox. So it's also a simile, right? So I hope the simile is clear. Basically, you have to understand that it's drawing analogy between two very unlikely things by using as or like. All right, let's move on to next figure of speech, that is metaphor. So metaphor is also an informal or implied simile, right? So the only difference between metaphor and a simile is that metaphor does not use as and like. Metaphor attributes those qualities to the person directly. It doesn't say it is like something else, it is something else, right? So that way Metaphor is an implied simile in which words like and as are omitted. Alright, so same way this also compares to unlikely things, to dissimilar things. Alright, look at the example. Like, he is a lion. We had a sentence earlier, he fought like a lion, right? So that means he's very aggressive, he's very ferocious, right? Or he's very brave. So these are the qualities we usually attribute to a tiger or a lion. So when we say he is a lion, that means in all these characteristics, right? The person is similar to a lion. Alright, so instead of saying like, instead of saying as, you say he is like a lion. Alright, she is a star of our family. So star, something which is shining, which is bright, which gives a lot of light, which is luminous. So all these characteristics of a star are being compared with a person. So she is like a star, will be simile. She is a star of our family. That means she is the brightest person of our family. Alright? She is now in the sunset of her days. Right? So possibly this metaphor is being used for a person who is in his old age or a person who is in the waning time of his popularity. So earlier he was very popular, he was successful, and now his brightness of his success is diminishing, or he's not as successful as he was earlier, and that's why we say he's now in the sunset of our days. So when it is sunset, it leads to darkness, it leads to night, and night is the end of the day. So here possibly the sunset as a metaphor is used for a person's last days or a person's those days where he's living in oblivion, right? He's not in a limelight or he's not very known to other people, right? So this metaphor, sunset, is used for a person's life stage, all right? Life is not a bed of roses. So another metaphor here. So when I say life is like a bed of roses, I use simile. When I say life is not a bed of roses, so instead of saying life is not easy, for this sentence could have been framed, could have been worded like this: life is not easy. Instead of saying this, I said life is not a bed of roses, right? So see, this conveys a different, same meaning, but the same meaning is conveyed in a very different way. Alright, so life is not a bed of roses means life is not easy. Alright, so this is how metaphors are used, omitting like and as. Simile, we'll use these words. The function is same, comparing to dissimilar things. Alright, look at some very common metaphors which are used in narratives. Dirty pig. So when you call somebody a dirty pig, that means the person is very filthy. He lives in a very unkempt way. He does not take care of his hygiene level, or he lives in a very disheveled fashion, right? Or certain other habits can also be attributed when you call somebody a dirty pig. All right, having two left feet, right? So a person who is very clumsy, especially when he performs a dance or she performs a dance, right? So when it comes to dancing, the person is not very skilled. The person does not have nimble feet to perform a dance, right? So here, instead of saying somebody a bad dancer, you say having two left feet, right? So that's how you use these metaphors to convey these meaning. To get cold feet, to get nervous when you are on tenterhooks, when you start to feel nervous about doing something, you say you have a cold feet, right? To be an early bird. So time and again you come across this term, an early bird discount. So early bird discount is coming from this only, to be an early bird. That means to reach somewhere first, or to reach somewhere at earliest, right? Pearls of wisdom. So look at this word, such a beautiful phrase. So instead of saying that I would like to know your wise words, so I would like to have your pearls of wisdom. See the beauty of language here, right? So it beautifies your sentence. At the same time, it also conveys that you are aware of these metaphorical ways of speaking, right? So it brings color to your conversational skills. To be warm, to be a sneaky person, right? A piece of cake, very easy, right? So learning all these figures of speech in a session alone is not a piece of cake, right? So you have to practice. You will have to look for certain examples, you have to do some exercises, and possibly you will have to revise this session again to remember all the words and remember all the figures of speech. So learning all the figures of speech at one go is not a piece of cake. That means instead of saying it's not very easy, I say it's not a piece of cake. Alright, so when you call somebody to be a night owl, so that means you're calling that person, he stays at night very long. He'll stay awake at night for very long, right? So he possibly sleeps in the wee hours of morning or very late in the night, right? So हम हिंदी में भी बोलते हैं वो तो उल्लू है, right? So that way, ullu is also a metaphor which is used for a person who is dumb, who is not very bright, who is not very intellectually advanced. At the same time, ullu, that means a person who stays awake at night, as ullu does. Alright? So these are metaphors. Now simile or metaphor, both simile and metaphors link one thing to another, right? So they compare, they link, they draw analogy. A simile usually uses as or like, a metaphor is condensed simile. It omits like and as, so it's condensed simile. A shortcut to meaning which omits as or like. So look at these examples. I hope the difference is clear, distinction is clear. Yet look at these examples. Your eyes are like the sun. So that's a simile. Look at this example. You are my sunshine, right? So you are like my sunshine. You are my sunshine. He eats like a pig, right? So that's also a simile because the eating habit is being compared with another person, an animal's eating habit or the way of eating. He says he is a pig. Now, it is left on your interpretation that what quality of pig you know that is compared with this person. A metaphor is, difficult to understand because he is a pig. So unless you know what pig is known for or what characteristic of pig are being compared with a person's habit, you may not be able to derive entire meaning. Sometimes when you come across a metaphorical phrase which comes from an alien culture, the culture which is not known to you, you may be puzzled about the meaning of that phrase because you don't know the culture. Alright? So metaphorical is more complicated than a simile. Another very important figure of speech which is widely used by authors and speakers is personification. As the name itself suggests, personification is when you attribute people's characteristic, human characteristic, to those things which are inanimated, those things which are lifeless, right? Those things which are lifeless are attributed human characteristics, human features. So now there you use personification. Time and again, we use this phrase, opportunity knocks door at once, right? So opportunity knocks door. So this sentence is the perfect example of personification because knocking door is a human attribute. A person who can walk, a person who can use his hand can only knock at the door, right? So it's a human attribute, human characteristic. Now this characteristic is ascribed to opportunity. So opportunity, which is an abstract notion, opportunity does not have a human form, does not have a physical form, cannot knock at the door, right? But here, when you have this kind of phrase, that means it creates a picture in your mind that opportunity is right there at my door. I just go and grab it with both my hands, all right? So that way you can understand that by using figurative speech, it creates that kind of magic in speaking and writing. So look at the examples. Walls have ears, right? So when we say, please hush up your voice, walls have ears, right? So that means walls can also listen to what we are speaking, right? So what we are talking about can also be heard by walls. So that way you are attributing audible capacity to walls. I heard the last piece of pie calling my name, right? So this is again a very interesting way to say that that pie, the piece of pie belonged to me. I am the person who should go and eat that piece of pie, right? So that way, instead of saying this, you say, I heard the last piece of pie calling my name, right? So it was yelling my name. It was calling me that come and eat me. All right. So again, the furious storm, the thirsty ground, and the pitiless cold. So pity, having mercy for someone or something, is again human emotion, right? So it's something which makes us human, right? So having pity, having mercy, being compassionate about other people and things is what makes us pitiful, right? So here when you say cold, pitiless cold, so cold is so harsh or it is so chilly that it does not have any mercy on people, right? So see this word, when you call pitiless cold, you are attributing that emotion to a season, to a weather pattern, all right? So that's an example of personification. My alarm clock yells at me to get out of bed every morning. So one more example of personification. An alarm clock does not yell. Yelling, shouting are human attributions. Alright? So you are saying that an alarm clock in the morning yells at me, that go and get dressed. Alright? So all these examples of personification. Look at some more examples of personification so that this figure of speech is amply clear. Laughing flowers, right? So poetic expression is laughing flowers. The flowers are laughing, they are smiling. Howling wind, smiling sun. So time and again, when we draw our first picture, when we draw our first painting, we attribute this smiling notion to the sun. So we treat sun as a human, which can smile, right? Or which can be annoyed, because when we draw a certain picture, we can show that sun is not happy, right? Or sun is wilting. So that way we keep on, attributing these emotions to sun. So smiling sun, opportunity knocks at the door. Shoe bites, right? So biting is again human attribute which you are ascribing to shoe. Blinking headlights, the buzzing city, dancing flames, a roaring fire, a furious storm, right? So all these examples are of personification. My car is smiling today because it has been washed. So that's also personification, because car is an inanimate object which does not smile. But when I say it is smiling today because it has been repaired, it has been washed, that means it looks really good. Right? So instead of saying this, I say it is smiling today. Alright? Metonymy. So metonymy is another figure of speech which is widely used in writing, usually in writing, which substitute one thing with other thing. Usually the thing which is associated with the person you want to talk about or you want to mention in your writing or in your speaking, right? So very famous example is the pen is mightier than the sword, right? So when I say the pen is mightier than the sword, I am basically talking about an author, a writer, and a soldier, a warrior, right? Because sword is the symbol of a warrior, because sword is used by a warrior in a war or in a battle, whereas a pen is used by a writer to express his thoughts, to express his opinion. So the sentence conveys here, the actual meaning that sentence conveys here is that a writer is mightier than a warrior or a soldier, right? So he has more strength, he has more power on people than a soldier has, right? So this is what the meaning of the sentence is. But look at the way this sentence is worded. So instead of using word soldier and writer, the sentence has used the objects which are usually associated with these people, right? A writer is not a writer without a pen. Unless he has something to write with, he cannot express his thoughts, right? Maybe in the time of laptop, in the time of internet, you may say that pen is not associated, but this is something which is still timeless, right? So the pen is mightier than the sword is the perfect example of metonymy, right? So from the cradle to the grave. So our example of metonymy, so cradle is again associated with childhood, this life stage where a person is still put in the cradle, right? So he's taken care of by his parents, he's surrounded by all the people who love him, and he's taken care of well. So cradle. And to the grave is death, from childhood to death. The day he was born to the day he died, right? So when you express this, you use this phrase. So cradle is associated with childhood and grave is associated with death, alright? I have never read Milton. So it's practically impossible to read a person, right? So you cannot read a person, but rather you can read what the person has written, right? So when you see I have read Shakespeare quite well, so that means whatever work Shakespeare has written, I have gone through his work quite well, all right? So Milton is again a metonymy for his work, all right? So this way, I hope the metonymy is clear. Uh, when you see the proceedings of Parliament, right? So you see that all people in Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, they address the Honorable Chair, right? That chair is associated with the Speaker of the House, right? Lok Sabha Speaker and in Rajya Sabha Vice President, right? So they are the Speaker of these two houses. So instead of saying honorable, whoever is Lok Sabha Speaker at present, honorable person or honorable speaker, you say honorable chair, right? So they time and again use this phrase as a metonymy because chair is associated with speaker. Whoever holds that position, the chair belongs to that person. All right. So that is also an example of metonymy. I hope with all these examples, it is sufficiently clear what this figure of speech means. So far we are done with simile, we are done with personification, metonymy, and metaphor. Alright? Yeah, so here comes another figure of speech which has very interesting meaning, euphemism. This word I covered when I discussed etymology. Etymology, one of the techniques for vocabulary building. In that, we had this root and we did a lot of words which are derived from this root. Euphemism, eulogy, euthanasia, euphoria, all words coming for good, right? Now, euphemism is one of the figures of speech which is widely used in all kind of narratives. By using the euphemism, we speak in agreeable and favorable terms of things and people. Usually these things or issues or people are maybe offended, or these issues are considered taboo, and that's why we use a very sugar-coated term to explain these things, right? So usually those things which are considered unpleasant or disagreeable, we replace these terms with something which is agreeable and which is less offensive, which is pleasant to hear. That style of speaking, that style of writing is euphemism. Alright? We use these euphemistical terms in our daily conversation without even knowing, realizing that we are using them. Right? For death, since it's again a topic which is not openly discussed, a lot of people consider discussing death as taboo, and that's why they do not discuss it openly. So for death, we have a couple of euphemistical terms which are widely used. So when we say he passed away, that's actually a euphemistic phrase only, right? So for person's death, instead of saying he died, you say he passed away. He left for heavenly abode, right? He breathed his last. So that way, all these phrases which are used for death are euphemistical terms, right? So in a way which is more agreeable, which does not sound offensive and which does not displease anyone when they hear these terms, alright? So हिंदी में भी आप बहुत सारी ऐसे phrases use करते हैं जो euphemistical phrase होते हैं. So look at the example here. He is telling us a fairy tale. Fairy tale is kind of a fabrication. Fairy tale is something which is far from truth, which is usually concocted by all the good things and all the details which are larger than life. Usually a fairy tale is something which is not true, which is not true in reality. So a fairy tale, when I tell someone that you don't tell me a fairy tale, instead of saying that don't tell me a lie, I'm asking that person that you are telling me a fairy tale. A fairy tale is as good as telling a lie. All right, so you may not want that person to get offended or get, you don't want to sound rude. You say don't tell me a fairy tale instead of saying don't tell me a lie. He passed away. As I said, this is widely used for death. Now see some euphemistical phrases which are commonly used in English. When you put somebody to sleep, that means the person or animal has been euthanized. We have discussed this word, mercy killing or euthanasia, giving somebody euthanasia. So when a person is terminally ill, there are no chances of his recovery or he is suffering from an incurable disease. Should he be killed legally by doctors, by accepted means of killing someone? So that whole issue is euthanasia. So put somebody to sleep, that means that person has been euthanized. Alright, that person has been legally killed. Ethnic cleansing was used for what Hitler did in Germany, right? So ethnic cleansing is word used for genocide. So genocide is killing of people on the basis of their caste and on the basis of their race, right? So when this is done, so this of course is a very negative word. This of course is a very derogatory word. So instead of calling that somebody was accused of genocide, you can say he perpetrated ethnic cleansing, though the word still has that negative connotation only, but this word has very strong meaning, right? But their meaning can be subsided. The harshness of the meaning can be subsided. It is a milder phrase. Collateral damage instead of accidental death. Collateral damage is also used when you wage a war, right? So you accept that some collateral damage is going to happen. That means whether you lose or you win, some people are going to lose lives. Some soldiers are going to lose their lives. So collateral damage, right? So instead of saying the accidental death, you say collateral damage. So in accepted narratives, you see a lot of people using these phrases. So they want to sound diplomatic, they want to sound polite, and accepted, and that's why they use these phrases instead of calling these using these phrases. They use these euphemistical phrases. Correctional facilities instead of a jail. He was put up in a jail. You say he was put up in a correctional facility. In Western world, this word is widely used, right? So when a person is put up in a jail, that means he is supposed to mend his ways. He is learning his lesson there. He has been put up as a punishment, but same time as a reformative part of judgment, as a reformative part of law. You are putting that person in a jail with a view to reforming him, with a view to mending his ways, right? So it's a correctional facility. Powder your nose when you want to go to washroom. Instead of saying that, in Western countries, this is a very common phrase which is used, that I need to powder my nose. That means I want to go to washroom. Vertically challenged, you call a person a vertically challenged person when the person is short. All right. So some more euphemistical terms that I would like to let you know are widely used in our discussion and debates. So instead of calling a person poor, you might have seen that now these people are called underprivileged. Right? Instead of calling somebody disabled, physically disabled, you call this person differently abled. Right? Or orally challenged. So person is not deaf, but the person is orally challenged, right? So that way, these phrases which are very offensive, negative, and can crush someone's spirit have been replaced by these terms which are more positive, which are more pleasant to hear, or which actually mitigate the negative effects of these words, right? So euphemism is also used to mitigate the negative effect. And here genocide, the term genocide, which is extremely cruel, is replaced with a euphemistical term, ethnic cleansing, to talk about it in a very accepted way, in a very cordial way. Alright? So you see, euphemism widely used in discussions, in conversations, in writing, in order to replace an offensive word with less offensive word. Alright? So don't tell me a fairy tale. So start using this phrase so that you bring variety in your conversation, you bring variety in your writing, and same time you learn how to word your sentences in more accepted way, right? So you are pink slipped, you are fired. Which do you think sounds agreeable? Of course, you are pink slipped, right? So possibly it's not very clear to you that you are being redundant for the company, right? So that way we are downsizing. When we say we are downsizing, so instead of saying that we are going to fire people, this word may not be as rude or as, you know, clear in its meaning as we are firing people can be, right? So we are downsizing. That means you want to take the effect down. You want to bring down the negative effect of the phrase, right? So you're firing, you're downsizing. Both mean same thing, but the way of putting these sentences make all the difference, right? You're pink slipped, you are downsizing, and you're between two jobs. So when I say I'm jobless, so that possibly cast aspersion on my ability that possibly I don't have the ability to get another job. So when I say I'm jobless, that also speaks of my inability to get a job. But when I say I'm between two jobs, that means I left a job that I'm going to get, I'm between these two jobs, right? So the phrase is same, the meaning is same, but the way they are worded makes whole difference. Right? Now, I hope you now understand the meaning of euphemism and its importance, right? So it's very, very important to learn how to say something agreeable, say something in a more pleasant way. All right? Let's get ahead and discuss what oxymoron is. Oxymoron is. Now, oxy and moron, these are two different words. These are two opposite words which are fused together, right? So I'll tell you the meaning of oxy and moron, and then you guess the meaning of oxymoron. Oxy is for life, oxygen. So something which brings life to lifeless things is oxy. So oxy comes for life. Moron is dull, lifeless, right? So oxymoron, two opposite words combined together, fused together to create a new word. It's a figure of speech which is used for those words which are opposite in nature, right? So it's a figure of speech which combines two seemingly contradictory or incongruous words for sharp emphasis or effect. All right? Look at the example. Darkness visible. Make haste slowly, right? Or loving hate. I have a loving hate relationship with someone. So that means I love that person, but same time there are some elements which I hate about him. Alright, so loving hate relationship. Make haste slowly. So if you're making haste, if you're doing something hastily, you cannot do it slowly. Or if you're doing it slowly, you cannot make haste. So that way you can see that the effect is created. At the same time, the words are contradictory. Constructive destruction, right? So that's my favorite example, constructive destruction. So when you construct something, it cannot destroy, but when you destroy something, it cannot construct. But this word itself also has meaning. This oxymoron also has a meaning. When you want to build a road, you have to put dynamite on that hilly area on the mountain to destroy them, right? It leads to destruction of those mountains in order to pave the way for a road, right? So that way the destruction is done for a constructive purpose, all right? So constructive destruction. Happily married, so that's another oxymoron, right? So happily and married, usually, people agree that a person who is happy cannot be married, or a person who is married cannot remain happy, right? So that's also oxymoron, very subjective, but you can understand the meaning. Exact estimate. So an estimate is a calculation, or is in calculation which is based on hunch. You are surmising that it's going to be the expenditure this month. So that's an estimate. Estimate cannot be exact. So when we say exact estimate, that's an oxymoron. Quiet role, student, teacher, passive aggressive, passive aggression, very commonly used phrase, right? Smaller half, magical realism, loyal opponent, right? So loyal opponent, so that's another oxymoron. Random order, live recording, or jumbo shrimp, right? So shrimp is very small, a minuscule form of something, jumbo is big. All right. So all these are examples of oxymoron, two opposite terms fused together. All right. So deafening silence. So silence which is so unnerving, so unsettling that it creates deafness, right? So deafening silence. All right. And natural actor. So an actor is always a person who acts out. You cannot be natural if you are acting, right? So natural acting is also an oxymoron. All right. So all these examples, only option. So that's also my favorite. Only option. So option means having a leeway of doing something. When you say it's an only option, that means you don't have an option to maneuver, right? That means you are supposed to do what you are required to do, right? Only option is also an oxymoron, right? So commonly used that we don't seem to know we are actually using these figure of speech. All right. My sister and I had a friendly fight. So friendly fight is always antagonistic. It can never be friendly. But a friendly fight, that means we possibly made out after this fight. Unbiased opinion. So opinion is always tinged with your biases, your prejudice, your preference, your liking. It cannot be completely unbiased, right? So when somebody has an opinion, usually the opinion is colored with what he feels is right, what he believes is correct, right? So that means it is always dictated by his biases, all right? So unbiased opinion is also an oxymoron. Awfully pretty. So when you call something awful, that means it's not beautiful, it's awful. Awfully pretty. So you are using this adverb to qualify how pretty this thing is. Whole piece, completely finished, alone together, true fiction, and organized mess. So all these are examples of oxymoron. The slide is with you. You can always refer to it and understand the sentences, because I have to cover a lot of figures of speech today, so I cannot afford to spend time on all these sentences, but I have compiled enough sentences to make it sufficiently clear for you that what these figures of speech are. All right. So you can go through the slide and understand them later on. So organized mess is an oxymoron. Okay, so famous oxymoron, True Lies, the very famous American movie True Lies. Cat dog, pretty ugly, big little lies. Alright, so waking dreams. So when you wake up, you cannot dream, and when you dream, you cannot wake up, right? So that's not the state you can be in when you dream. You have to sleep when you wake up, when you dream. So that way you can understand the oxymoron is also used in making the title of these movies, or designing the titles of the book and the quotes, right? So you will see cinema and the titles of movie, titles of books replete with oxymoron. All right. Now, as I said in the very beginning of today's session, that they are widely used in music, right? So there are three prominent figures of speech which are frequently used to create sound, to bring music to language, right? So words bring language alive in the reader or listener's imagination, right? So when my senses are activated, when my auditory senses are activated, when I read something or when I listen to something, possibly I'm hearing some or other rhetorical device which is using the brain, the effect of sound. All right. Let's look at the example. Let's look at one of the figures of speech which is based on sound. alliteration. Now we all may be aware of this word or the phrases which use alliteration, right? So when we were very young, we used to have tongue twisters, right, in Hindi as well as in English, right? So in Hindi, this famous song, which was based on alliteration. There was a song, I'll just tell you, and there are tongue twisters which are based on alliteration only. So the repetition of the same letter or syllable at the beginning of two or more words is called alliteration, right? So one or two letters are repeated consecutively. So Sally sells seashells by the seashore. So S letter is being repeated, right? The fair breeze blew, the white foam flew. So F is repeated, B is repeated. Alright, so that is the alliteration of first letter. Dirty dogs dig in the dirt. You see D getting repeated. Cute cats cooking cats. Beautiful Barbara boasted about her bravery, right? So this is how they are bringing kind of, music to the listeners' mind, because when they repeat this letter, it kind of creating a rhythm. It is kind of creating a rhythm while reading and while speaking. All right, so that is the whole purpose of using alliteration in a sentence, is that musical rhythm. All right, creating that musical effect and musical rhythm. So now, as I said, it is widely used in advertising slogans, right? So cold coffee, Coca-Cola, Happy Harry and Donald Duck. So all these examples where these famous characters are created keeping in the mind alliteration, because it stays in reader's mind, it stays in listener's mind, right? Drink and drive, don't drink and drive. You see D getting repeated in all these words, right? So they are intentionally made or designed to be catchy, so they stay in your mind, because when we listen to it, when we hear these letters getting repeated, they tend to stay in our mind and memory for a long time. Alright? So alliteration, repetition of the first letter. Okay, so the song was Chanda Chamke Cham Cham, right? Chikhe Chokanna Cho. So the movie Fana, the song was there, which used this alliteration. Alright? Fine. Another figure of speech which is based on sound, creating sound effect in poetry or in writing or speaking, is onomatopoeia. The formation of a word whose sound is made to suggest or echo the sense in a writing or speaking is onomatopoeia. Like when I say chuk chuk, so chuk chuk is representing a train, a rail gadi, right? When I say trin trin, so it is using this sound is used to represent a telephone, because this was a sound made by a telephone. When I say chum chum, chapak, all these words are related with water. So instead of saying it's raining, I use chum chum. Alright? So with that relatable examples, I guess you understand what an onomatopoeia is, right? So it is the way of using the sound, mentioning the sound instead of using the word or the object that makes the sound. All right. The word tinkle is also onomatopoeia. It mimics the sound of a bell or falling water. So tinkling water, right? So chuck, 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 puff, ding dong. The little train rumbled over the tracks. So you see these sounds, chuck, 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 puff, 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 and ding dong. So these sounds create that, imagination in your mind, in reader's mind, that how it was, running and what sound it was making when it was running on the track. Alright? So that is onomatopoeia, that was alliteration, repeating letter, replacing sound instead of using the Now, instead of using the person, you use the name of the sound. One more figure of speech which is based on this sound effect, that is assonance. So the basic difference between an alliteration and assonance is the assonance is a literally device where the same vowel sound is repeated more than 2 times in nearby words in a phrase or a sentence. Right? So their consonant is repeated here, vowel sound is repeated. Alright? So look at the sentence. It beats as it sweeps, as it cleans. So that's the slogan for Hoover vacuum cleaners. As I said, these are widely used in advertising slogans and catchy catchphrases. So here, the slogan of Hoover vacuum cleaner says it beats, it sweeps, and it cleans. So the sound is repeated. The vowel sound, which is there in all 3 words, which I have underlined, is getting repeated. And that way, it creates that rhythmic effect when you repeat it, when you read it out. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. Famous words, the iconic words are using the effect of assonance. So see this sound, double E, double E, double E in all these sentences, right? So that vowel effect, which creates the rhythmic impact when I read it, alright? I hope we are clear. So the basic difference between alliteration and assonance is one repeats a consonant sound, a consonant letter, whereas assonance emphasizes vowel sound. Alright? Hyperbolic. So I have told you 1,000 times that you have to revise these sessions. I have told you 100 times that you have to take note and write down these words that I explained in my sessions. Have I literally told you 100 times or have I literally told you 1,000 times? Possibly not, right? So I was being hyperbolic here. That means I was, for bringing that effect or bringing that emphasis in my speaking, in my statement, I was exaggerating. I was in a way fabricating. I was stretching a bit, alright? So that is what is the function of hyperbolic statement, a figure of speech in which exaggeration is used for emphasis or effect. I have told you to clean your room 1,000,000 times. It was so cold, I saw polar bears wearing hats and jackets. So when I use this sentence, possibly you can understand that how much severe or how much harsh the weather is, right? That a polar bear is also wearing a hat or a jacket, right? I'm so hungry I could eat horse. See the dramatic effect this sentence creates, that the person who hears this sentence would definitely come to know that person is actually famished and craving for eating something. He needs something to assuage his hunger. Alright? So hyperbolic statement are those statements which use exaggeration, which use a bit of fabrication to bring that dramatic effect. Alright? Now epigram, let's move on to talk about epigram. It's a brief, pointed saying. It couples words which apparently contradict each other, right? The language of the epigram is remarkable for its brevity. So the main characteristic which defines an epigram is it's very brief, it's very concise, right? At the same time, it is something which conveys wisdom. An epigrammatic style of saying is something which conveys wisdom, conventional wisdom, traditional wisdom, or any kind of wisdom, right? But it's a pointed saying, all right? Usually, which is made by bringing two opposite things together. Look at the examples. Child is the father of the man, right? So here, this sentence looks contradictory because a child who is possibly a newborn or possibly very young cannot be the father of the man, right? But the sentence is also carrying a lot of wisdom here. So it's contradictory because child cannot be the father of the man. But the sentence is actually conveying that what habits you form in your childhood, the habits that you are cultivated in your childhood remain with you all your life, right? And that life period that you have in the early years of your life form and shape the personality that make you a man. So the child, that means as a child what you learn, as a child what you do, shape your personality and make you a man. So your child, you as a child are the father of the man. That means your entire personality is fathered by your childhood, right? So that's such an intelligent saying, but it is worded in a way which is contradictory. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. So we time and again we are told this, that fools rush in where angels fear to tread. That means don't jeopardize your safety or don't put your life in a risk, in a risky situation, because there is some wisdom to the saying. The art lies in concealing art, right? So it may not be something which is conveying wisdom or conveying some wise words, but same time this is an epigram because it is fusing two contradictory phrases, two contradictory ideas together. The art is something to showcase, the art is to demonstrate, right? So when an artist creates a piece of art, or whichever way he creates his craft, is there to showcase to people, right? He wants appreciation or he wants monetary rewards. For whatever motive he has created, he wants something in return. So that is created, that should be created for depicting it. But same time, the sentence says it lies in concealing art. That means when you do something for exploring your artistic abilities, your artistic sensibilities, not to showcase to others, but rather whatever you feel like creating, you create, that is possibly your artistic piece, right? So it lies in concealing art, right? So you don't showcase, you don't depict it, but rather you create it for your own sake, art for the art's sake, right? Silence is sometimes more eloquent than words, conspicuous by its absence, right? So both these epigrammatic sentences which are conveying wisdom, which are saying at the same time, are opposite, right? So silence is sometimes more eloquent than words. That means you don't have to speak sometime to say what you want to say. You just keep mum and possibly what you want to say is conveyed. So that is more eloquent. That means keeping silence or stay silent is sometimes more persuasive than speaking, right? So that way this is again opposite, isn't it? Contradictory. How silence, when you're not speaking, when you're not saying something, is conveying your thoughts, conveying your opinion. But that may be a case in some scenario. Conspicuous by its absence. So somebody who is absent, that means he has not made his presence felt, is noticeable, is being talked about, right? Because of being absent in a place, right? So all these sentences are epigrammatic because they are short, they are terse, they are conveying wisdom, same time they are fusing to contradictory terms, right? Mark Twain, very famous for his epigrammatic style. When you see tweets, famous tweets, so you see they are written in a very epigrammatic style. They are terse, to the point, convey some wisdom, and same time, um, you know, they may convey things in an opposite or contradictory way. They may not, but they are written in an epigrammatic style. All right, pun. So pun is a literary device that is also known as a play on words. So understand, play on words is the defining phrase for pun. So puns involve words with similar or identical sounds but with different meaning. Right? Their play on words also relies on a word or phrase having more than one meaning, usually homonyms which have similar sound, similar words, or homophones which have similar sound are used for creating this figure of speech. Right? Look at the examples here. The cyclist was too tired to win the race. So here, too tired, spelling is tired, right? And here, tired verb is used. So the cyclist was too tired. That means the cycle was too tired. It has two tires, right? But the sense it is conveying is that he was too tired, he was so exhausted that he could not win the race, right? So this word, which is homophone, this word which is homophone is used as a wordplay to create fun. Look at another example. The population of Ireland is always doubling. So Dublin is the name of a place, which is the capital of Ireland. Dublin is also creating the sound of bringing a twofold effect to something, doubling, right? So G is missing here in the spelling, but when you pronounce it, you can, create the same effect. The population of Ireland is always doubling. That means it's increasing exponentially. All right. The population of Ireland is always doubling is conveying two meanings. Atheism is a non-profit organization. So you say non-profit organization, here non-profit, right? So that way you see it's play on words. You play on those words which are homophones and homonyms, and you create double meaning sentences which can actually have two interpretations, right? So with what first we can have two interpretations. With all these sentences we have two interpretations. That is the chief characteristic of a pun. It always conveys two meanings. All right. Now in Romeo and Juliet, written by Shakespeare, a cobbler, when he is asked what he does or what his occupation is, he replies, "I am a mender of bad soles." Right? So here soles, S-O-L-E-S, soles are the bottom of your shoes, right? So bad soles. So as a cobbler, his primary function was to repair those bad soles which are worn out, which need repairing or which need mending, right? At same time, when he says it, "I am a mender of bad souls," he also can be interpreted that bad souls, S-O-U-L-S, souls, those people who don't have good souls, those people who are not good spirited, are mended by this man. Right? So see how beautifully with this sentence alone he has created that dramatic effect. "I am a mender of bad souls" can be taken in two ways. I mend those people who are on wrong path. I mend shoes which have bad soles. Alright? So with this example, I guess the meaning of pun is clear. Antithesis, right? So antithesis, as the name itself suggests, so thesis is an idea, a theory which is propounded. Anti means opposite to it, alright? So which literally means opposite. It is a rhetorical device in which two opposite ideas are put together in a sentence to achieve a contrasting effect. Look at the sentence. It's a beautiful sentence which is used by Neil Armstrong when he reached moon. "Setting foot on the moon may be a small step for a man, but a giant step for mankind." Right? So in a sentence, in order to bring this dramatic effect, how beautifully he has used small step and giant step. So for a man, single man, it can be a small step. But for a mankind, reaching moon was, a giant leap. Alright? So that way you can understand this is antithesis, two opposite ideas. Love is an ideal thing, marriage is a real thing. Speech is silver, but silence is golden. Patience is bitter, but it has sweet fruit. So I have boldfaced these opposite words which are fused in a single sentence. Right? So antithesis, opposite idea. So famous iconic lines written by Charles Dickens. "It was the best of times, it was the worst of time. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was a season of light, it was a season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, we all were going direct the other way. So, how beautifully you see all the opposite words worded in a single sentence, right? So, you see all the sentences using antithetical idea: best of time, worst of time, wisdom, foolishness, right? And with that, he has created these iconic lines, which mark the beginning of his famous novel. All right. So, are we clear with antithesis? Now look at one more. Now, if you have seen carefully, all these epigram, antithesis, and now we are discussing paradox, all are based on contradictory, opposite ideas, right? But there are subtle differences. So, a paradox is a seemingly absurd or contradictory statement or proposition which, when investigated, may prove to be well founded or true. So change is the only constant in life. So it's an idea which is contradictory, right? So the meaning which comes out is contradictory, right? So that's what is the difference between an antithesis and a paradox. The idea is absurd. The idea seems contradictory. There, the words are contradictory. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, right? But here, the idea itself is absurd. Look at the sentence. Change is the only constant thing in life. With change, nothing remains constant. Change is defined by changing things, not keeping the things constant, not keeping the things same. So, when you have this idea, this looks absurd, but when you see closely, when you see deeply, you will see it conveys that meaning, that wisdom, right? I can resist anything but temptation. Oscar Wilde returned the statement, which is again a paradox. So I can resist anything but temptation. That means I cannot resist anything. Right? So temptation is only thing that you want to resist. But I can resist anything but temptation. That means you cannot actually resist anything. In William Shakespeare's Hamlet, the title character states, I must be cruel to be kind. Now, this character possibly believes that, okay, so this actually comes from Hamlet, where he wants to kill the assassin of his father, right? And he says, in order to restore the balance, I have to kill him. I have to kill him so that to do justice with my father. So I have to be kind with my father, and to be kind to my father, I have to be cruel with his assassin. Right? So that way you can understand it's so contradictory. It's absolutely paradoxical. If you are kind, you cannot be cruel. Right? So that way you understand the situation, but same time when I explain it to you that what is the background, now you can understand that it had meaning. Right? So the idea is absurd. Change is the only concept, idea itself seems absurd, but on a deeper reflection, you see it conveys deeper meaning. Alright? So that is paradoxical. We are full of paradoxes. In India, we have a lot of paradoxes. We have more means of communication, but we have less communication, right? So with more means of communication, you should have more communication, but we tend to have less communication, right? We have more to eat, but less to digest now. That's another paradox, right? So more to eat, that means now we are wealthy, possibly we are earning enough, and that's why we can have more and more things. But same time, since our health is not in good shape, or we are not keeping in good shape, we are not in pink of our health, we cannot digest everything that we can afford to buy, right? That's a paradox. All right, look at one more example of paradox. So Francis Bacon says the most corrected copies are commonly the least correct, right? So that's also a paradox. In George Orwell's Animal Farm, the first commandment of the animals' commune is revised into a witty paradox. It says all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. So when it says all are equals, right after that, it brings that paradoxical dimension to the statement that some are more equal. That means some are superior. in some ways than others, right? And they should be given special treatment. They should be treated specially, right? So some all are equal, but some are more equal. So that's equal means somebody who is at par, who is on par with other people. That means there is nothing, nobody beneath, nobody above, right? But here, when you say this statement that everyone is equal, but some animals are more equal than others, that means you're creating that disparity. So that absurd, right? So equal cannot be, among equals, there cannot be disparity, but you are creating this disparity by saying some are more equal than others. See this paradox in literature. Alright? I hope this paradox is clear. In Hindi, we call paradox विरोधाभास, right? So विरोधाभास आप जब बात करते हैं कि आपके statement में विरोधाभास है, that means what you are saying is contradicted, right? So that situation, we often encounter such situations when we have such, contradictory statements, right? So that is virodhabhas. Now, one more figure of speech which is based on contradiction only, that is irony. Now, irony in Hindi is vidambana, right? So this is paradox. This is virodhabhas. So this is extended form of oxymoron. So oxymoron is a phrase, paradox is the extension of that phrase. So ideas are opposite, ideas are contradictory, right? Where oxymoron is the term which is contradictory, right? So I hope the difference is clear. Now irony is vidambana. A situation in which something which is intended to have a particular result has the opposite or a very different result, right? That is irony, ironical situation. Time and again, you come across this word in reading comprehension as well, right? So where you read this word, putting up before a sentence which expresses author's attitude, right? So author possibly finds it very absurd that this situation conveys contradictory situation. A situation conveys an absurd situation, creates an absurd situation, right? So that way you understand ironical attitude of the author. So a fire station burns down. So a fire station which is supposed to protect fire, which is supposed to put out fire, is burning down because of fire. Because the fire station caught fire and it burned down. So that's an irony. So a fire station should be equipped with all the tools and the machinery to extinguish fire, but it burned down because there was huge fire. So that's an irony. Alright? A marriage counselor files for divorce. So that's another irony, an ironical situation here, because a person who serves or works as a marriage counselor is supposed to have all the wisdom, is supposed to have all techniques to iron out any difference with his spouse. He should know all the ways to come out with an amicable solution to resolve the conflict in his marriage. But instead of doing that, he's filing for divorce. That means he himself could not counsel his partner or himself for bringing a consensus, right? Or for restoring peace in his marriage. So that way you understand that, this is an irony, an absurd situation. He's supposed to be so sorted, he's supposed to be so compatible in his relationship because he's a counselor and he's a relationship or marriage counselor, but he's facing differences or he's facing conflict in his own marriage. Alright? A police station gets robbed. I give you these examples just to clarify what irony means. So situational irony, there is dramatic irony also. So it is one of the ironies of life that by the time you have earned enough money for the things you always wanted, you no longer have the energy to enjoy. Right? So it looks absurd because by the time you earn enough money, sufficient money to splurge on things that you had always wanted to buy, you have enough money now, but you possibly have lost your desire to own those things. Because now you are not so materialistic, or possibly you don't have health to enjoy everything. So when you have money, you cannot enjoy life, right? And the time you wanted to have these things, you did not have money. So ironies of life. Alright, vidambana. So we have, time and again I give this example whenever I explain irony. Mahatma Gandhi, a man who lived an austere life all his life, he lived with utter simplicity. He survived with bare minimum things, right? And he exemplified that kind of lifestyle to be followed by others, right? So he was the advocate of living a very simplistic life. Now, a company, French company, Montblanc, comes to India, launches a pen worth rupees 60,000 devoting Mahatma Gandhi. He was attributed this pen by this company that as a first launch, the company gave tribute to Mahatma Gandhi. The pen was worth rupees 60,000. So that's an irony. Man is tributed a pen worth rupees 60,000, a man who lived his life with simplicity. Alright? So that is an irony. Alright? So, okay. One more, very quickly. Let's discuss this and then we will do some questions. Lie to tease. Lie to tease is an ironic statement in which an affirmative is expressed by the negative of its contrary. So when I say it's not a bad idea, right? So when I say it's not a bad idea, I mean it's a good idea. But instead of saying it's a good idea, I say it's a bad idea, right? So when you say affirmative, but you frame sentence in a negative way, that is lie to tease. It's not rocket science, right? So when I say it's not very difficult, I say it's not a rocket science. That means it's very easy to understand. He isn't the brightest bulb in the box. That means he's not the smartest kid, or he's possibly not very intelligent, right? You won't be sorry you bought this knife set. So instead of saying you will be happy if you buy this knife set, you won't be sorry, right? You won't be sorry if you revise this session again and attempt your exercise on figure of speech. You won't be sorry. That means this is how lightities can be framed in a sentence. A trip wasn't a total loss. That means a trip was fairly good. Instead of saying this way, affirmative sentence, it was not a total loss. Alright? So negative is put in a sentence to say affirmative, to say something positive. Allusion is a brief and indirect reference to a person, place, thing or idea, or historical, cultural, literal or political significance, right? So allusions are used widely in writing and in speaking. You find a lot of biblical allusions in Bible, you find a lot of allusions in our scriptures as well as in our mythological writings, right? So don't act like a Romeo. It's an illusion because here Romeo is a reference to Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet character, right? A passionate lover. Guess who the new Newton of our school is. So that's also illusion, right? Because you are alluding to someone who is possibly as intelligent as Newton was. Look, I am not Mother Teresa. I have made mistakes, but I am trying. So allusion here is to the characteristic which Mother Teresa embodies, right? So here, the compassion, altruistic spirit, kindness, and serving others, being sympathetic to others, all these characteristics are embodied by Mother Teresa. So when I say I am no Mother Teresa, that means I don't possess all these characteristics. So that's the way you allude to someone. You take indirect reference, right? So when you say somebody big bull, so that's an illusion. Sorry, that's an allusion to a man who is known as big bull, right? So that's an allusive way of calling someone, right? So you don't name that person directly. You don't call Harshad Mehta, but you say the big bull of Bombay stock market, right? So that's an allusion for Harshad Mehta. Alright, so when people avoid taking names or they try to circumvent with taking direct names, they use allusive ways of forming and naming people. So that way, allusions are also used by media, avoiding taking people's name directly, right? So okay, fine. So I hope the allusion is clear. Now very quickly, we have these questions which appeared in Snap and Zad. So which of these following sentence draws the metaphor. All right, so the sentences are framed in a way they seem to be very difficult and complicated, but if you see closely, you will get to see a very simple sentence which is conveying a metaphor is second. Karl Marx labeled the capitalist a parasite. He termed these capitalists, a parasite, right? So they are not like parasite, they are a parasite, right? So they are thriving on others' life. They are sucking life from other organism or other life forms, right? So that way capitalists thrive on other people's money. So that way, instead of saying this, he says Karl Marx label the capitalist a parasite. So that's the metaphor. Is that 2011, I guess, which sentence includes an example of personification. Okay, so place money is the example of personification, right? So this phrase is money plays an important part. So this phrase is so commonly used, it ceases to look like a personification. But a part is usually played by a person, but money plays an important part. So here it's personification, right? Which of these sentences suffers from hyperbole? Hyperbole, right? So hyperbolic statement, I hope you are clear with the definition or you remember the definition. It is a sentence which is exaggerated, right? So here, look at first sentence. Most collectors of coins would give the earth to own one of the copper coins issued by Muhammad bin Tughlaq, right? So the sentence exaggerates the effect by saying that these people are going to sacrifice everything they own in the world for owning a piece of coin issued by Muhammad bin Tughlaq. So possibly something which is not worthwhile to give up all the world you possess, right? So here, but their desire, it just shows that how desirous they are, how keen they are to own a coin issued by Muhammad bin Tughlaq, right? So in order to bring that effect, the sentence uses hyperbole, right? Which sentence includes a euphemism. So as I said, euphemism is substituting an offensive term with a mild phrase or word which brings down the effect or which mitigates the effect. So here the sentence is a cemetery is a place where people are buried when they pass away, right? So when they pass away, a euphemistical word for death. Which sentence uses an oxymoron? Again, I hope you remember the oxymoron. Opposite words fused together, intermingled in one meaning, in one phrase. So the sentence which is an oxymoron here is kindness suffocating. He loved his aunt but found her kindness suffocating. So kindness must be comforting. Kindness must be nurturing. But here kindness is suffocating, right? So that is oxymoron. Snap. One of these years, Snap gave this question, so sober sometimes he is and smiles on silly things. Very clearly, first letter is repeated, consonant sound is repeated, that is alliteration. As proud as peacock, that's a simile, we did this. Death lays its icy hands on kings, right? So death has hands. So death, an abstract notion, an abstract concept is attributed human characteristic. Having hands, lays its hands, right? So death is being used as a person, so that is personification. Alright? So here we come to the end of today's session. It was quite exhaustive and comprehensive, I guess, which covered all the important figures of speech which have appeared in questions as well as options, right? I told you time and again, they have also appeared in some of the questions of reading comprehension, where the question was, which of these rhetorical devices has been used by author to put up his argument, right? Was it an alliteration? Was it an irony, paradox, antithesis? What it was, right? So they are very, very close. I would urge all of you to go through this slide again, get more clarity of these figures of speech, their definition, their examples, and how they are used by different authors, right? So since they are going to beautify your language, so when you start writing and when you start having conversation and frame your sentences using these figures of speech, they are definitely going to embellish your language. They are definitely going to bring that dramatic effect in your life, right? So keep using them, but before that, please revise all these figures of speech. Thank you very much. Keep watching this channel and my videos for more such sessions for your preparation for CAT and your management exams. And please do share with me your inputs, your opinion and your thoughts on this session, as well as what topics and what concepts you want me to cover in coming videos. Alright, thank you very much.